savings initiatives. That's a huge, I think I would say more than, it's a significant portion. Okay, now let me get into the actual defining what we mean by, I think, the EE market, the players there, and what kind of different activities happen there. So when you talk about energy efficiency, energy management, obviously one part of the value chain that comes into play is the ESCO energy service company. This concept is quite, I would say, mature and popular in the US. It's kind of evolved from that. And there are different contractual methodologies and different kind of commercial arrangements which kind of happen in this whole sphere of energy efficiency. So here we look at a generic model of the life cycle. So it starts with analysis and auditing basically in terms of what is the baseline thing, what is the opportunity to improve, what needs to be done. Then it goes on to project design, by financing of it, equipment procurement, installation. So this is like any other project, just that I think this whole project is focused on conserving or saving energy. Just to give you an idea in terms of different kind of companies that are involved in different services. See again here we have a range of companies involved in the whole ecosystem of energy efficiency, energy management, including the accredited energy service companies, the consultants, the engineering consultants, the architect and engineering design firms, again basically more from a building standpoint, equipment vendors, and also the construction contractors that actually install and service commission the equipment. So there could be overlaps. I think one company could be performing multiple functions. So I'm not going to go through each of those. This just gives you an idea in terms of what are the different types of companies and different activities they carry in this kind of space. So looking at how the whole the performance contracting thing works. So typically in a kind of industrial or in a commercial environment, what happens is basically the big barrier for energy management initiatives is the upfront cost, I think. The cost involved in terms of setting up that project and then the return on investment, 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it is, I think that's a big barrier. So obviously I think one key aspect of the uptake for this whole market is in terms of awareness, education of the customer and also the ecosystem here. And this chart just kind of shows how kind of you can reduce on our OPEX. This dollar spend is typically the operation expenditure, and how that reduction is kind of going into potentially different areas. Like say, it goes to service the interest cost, it goes to the ESCO fee, and also eventually the customer keeps whatever the top portion is. This is a very notional representation, but kind of talks about how the whole performance contracting kind of arrangement works. And a little bit more in terms of multiple models. Again, I would say this is something which is quite prominent in the US and in some of the other mature economies, wherein there are two different options. Either the ESCO company takes complete ownership for the entire project, including sourcing of financing and implementation, or ESCO company typically undertakes only the contracting job, which means I think they do the audits, they do the measurement, verification, maintenance, etc. But the sourcing of the equipment or the procurement activity is the responsibility of the end customer. So again, the benefits and risks are accordingly split in these two models. In both of these models, ESCOs do guarantee a certain level of savings or efficiency improvement. And in the first model, you see the guaranteed savings model. ESCO guarantee energy savings and covers for the shortfall, if any. Whereas in the other model, what happens is, I think, if the net savings is less than the guaranteed amount, ESCOs of course cover the shortfall. And if there is any excess, obviously ESCO keeps it. They don't kind of part it with the end customer, obviously, because they're going to be fully investing and servicing the loan component here. So it's basically the risk-reward model, which way you want to kind of go with the financing of the project. And some of the energy efficiency measures or opportunities for energy efficiency improvement in an industrial scenario, looking at could be in terms of the power plants. Within power plants, it can be in terms of refueling, in terms of changing the drives, in terms of substation efficiency improvement, or it could be in terms of optimizing the specific load factor, in terms of lighting, in terms of motor system. So I think we kind of listed a range of things in a typical manufacturing process service industry, I think, which can be a potential target for energy efficiency improvement. So now we look at what are some of the, I would say, objectives or roles of governments in this market. Again, this is not, I would say, specific to Singapore, but this is something more generic in nature and which can potentially applies to any government. I think one of the big concerns or issues with energy, the whole energy efficiency, the energy management business, is lack of information actually, in terms of return on investment, in terms of any baseline studies, in terms of what are the best practices which has been achieved in other countries, so on and so forth. So one big area where the governments can help is in terms of creating those awareness and education for the organizations involved in terms of the in terms of best practice. I think giving more information to the companies for them to decide what is best for them. Second thing is in terms of appropriate skills. I think having the right kind of people to support the growth and development of that industry. Again, that's been a big concern. I think currently, at least, we're seeing with the new Energy Efficiency Act, I think Singapore is mandating energy managers for a certain capacity, 15 gigawatt hours and above. Obviously, that means I think there's a need for creating that manpower and the planning for that manpower moving forward as the economy grows. And also, I think in certain cases, undertaking project development support and also providing financial support. Again, this is on a very case-by-case basis. And also strengthening policies and introducing reforms on a regular basis as required. Here we again try to map the different incentives available by country in the Asia-Pacific region. Let me kind of quickly explain what each of these terminologies mean. Of course, National Energy Plan is having a comprehensive plan that involves or includes a certain level of measures for energy efficiency and energy management. Government direct transfers are basically incentives which the government gives in terms of subsidy, grant, or rebate. So that's what typically it's termed as government direct transfer. And in the Singapore context, probably the GREET scheme would kind of fit into that particular definition. And the financial incentives are typically any tax subsidy, tax schemes or loans, I think, which are provided by from the government or through the commercial establishments. So probably the EASE scheme could probably be fitting into the definition. So what we're looking at is government support in terms of finance and non-financial kind of provisions. And voluntary measures are something which either the industry or the specific company themselves do undertake as a part of their global, say, mandate. Large multinational organizations do have their own global policies or, say, ways of doing things by which they implement certain things, whether or not that particular company offered the initiative. So this is part of the voluntary measures. So what are some of the common energy efficiency improvement barriers? I think one big challenge has been in terms of difficulty in capital arrangement and also lack of financing schemes. Again, I should kind of say add a caveat here that probably this is not a big factor in Singapore. We did a survey about a year back regarding these barriers, and financing was never a big issue from a Singaporean context. They say it's not that difficult to arrange money from an industrial perspective. They say financing is not a barrier, it's not something which should probably be a big stumbling block for them to implement energy savings programs. There are issues beyond that. Perceived high risk of investment recovery, again, this is more in terms of enough baseline data, in terms of awareness, etc. And customer preference to invest in production-related improvements rather than on energy efficiency. I think this is again something we have heard time and again in an industrial context, not so much in a commercial. In industrial context, always I think it's perceived, especially on the SME side, it's perceived that I think it's probably better return on investment to put the money in production improvement. And imperfect information on energy saving potential. Again, I would say the awareness here needs to be created by the ESCOs, by the vendors of equipment, and also by the kind of government-related agencies which have a stake in that. Because the information is critical for organizations to make their decision. And another big factor we saw is the reluctance of customer to enter into long-term contracts, especially if it's going to be a shared savings contract or things which need a commitment over a 5, 7, 10-year period. I think they're not obviously sure because the economic cycles are kind of quite difficult for them to make a decision that for that longer duration of period. And also inconsistency of information. Again, this is something that typically happens in a regular market environment because there are multiple vendors, multiple ESCOs. So obviously, I think there could be different factors influencing them to present to customer. So that becomes a big barrier in terms of these projects to move ahead. And also, I think the sunk costs are difficult to estimate, especially when you talk about a longer duration. Okay, these are some of the energy efficiency initiatives, especially from the Singaporean context. Again, for those of you from Singapore, I'm sure most of you have good knowledge of these things. But just to kind of highlight, I'll talk about these three things here. One is the GREET scheme, I think, which is the Grant for Energy Efficiency Technologies, and the other one is the Energy Efficiency Improvement Assistance Scheme. So these, I think, schemes are ongoing ones initiated by the government. The EAC scheme involves, I think, needs to involve ESCO, accredited ESCO in terms of getting funding from that. Whereas the GREET scheme is meant to infuse new efficient technologies into a manufacturing or into a process environment. So that can be directly obtained from the government. And the other, I think, important factor moving forward from this year is the Energy Conservation Act, which mandates appointment of energy managers in a facility which has more than 15 gigawatt hours of annual consumption, and a report of energy use, and also submission of energy improvement plans for large users. So I'm going to kind of take this into my next few slides where I'm going to analyze each of the specific sectors and giving you scenarios where I think the market could grow faster or slower depending on the, depending on the intensity with which this particular program is being, implemented by the respective organizations. Of course, there is a government act, I think, which mandates that this has to happen. But beyond that, the initiative is with the companies to see how they're going to be extending that argument in terms of really taking the of it. So we're going to see three scenarios in the next slides. Some of the developments here in terms of, I think, the energy efficiency market. So Panasonic entered into a public-private partnership model with 3 local agencies to develop and manage the HEMS, actually, Home Energy Management System. So this is on the distribution end, basically. And Green Concepts is again a Singapore-based company, introduced a cloud-based energy management solution. This is, I think, for the industries, for kind of monitoring their energy utilization, and buildings, I think, both buildings and industries. I think we're also looking at typically, I think, some of the initiatives from Singapore in terms of the government, in terms of the IES pilot project, and also I think the overall the networking in terms of wireless and user friendliness for that, I think, which will kind of improve the opportunity for SaaS kind of environment. So now looking at specifically the industrial energy efficiency market, what are some of the drivers or levers for the market growth? I think the major one is, of course, the policy push and the support through initiatives. Obviously, I think with the Energy Act, which is getting implemented this year, and also the other schemes, I think we see overall the uptake of the energy efficiency programs. And of course, the realization about the total cost of ownership. So it's not about capex at that particular point for retrofits. It's also the 5, 10, 15-year period, I think, through which they're going to be owning and servicing these assets. And I think the awareness about bottom line improvement by kind of implementing the energy efficiency or lowering the energy consumption. And also, I think the overall awareness about the kind of branding of companies about being green. I think a lot of these awards which are given out are supported by the different government agencies and the business federations, I think definitely has created enough awareness among the industries kind of to embark on this initiative. The big impediments, more focused on the industrial side, is the technological complexity of audits in the industrial sector. Again, I think there are very few qualified companies that can undertake audits and provide credible recommendations to the industries in terms of energy efficiency improvement. I think the primary reason or issue is because it's not one size fits all like building. In building, there are specific standard building blocks, so it's probably easier for a ESCO or an auditing company to come and recommend things. Whereas in industries, I think you have such a wide variety of industries from pharma, chemicals, petrochemicals, and a lot of these have proprietary processes. So obviously it's very tough, or it's kind of almost impossible for one company to kind of go in and provide a credible recommendation. And also, I think one of the big challenges we have kind of at least come to understand is typically in buildings you have very limited number of qualified engineers who kind of run or manage the building. Whereas in an industrial environment, you've got to have an array of design, manufacturing, production, and energy engineers. And it's going to be always difficult to convince all the different stakeholders. Either it's by the third-party ESCO or even by their own energy managers. So we have heard that. I think that's one of the big issues with respect to industry, unless there's a global, well-established practice of following certain energy conservation measures. Lack of awareness, focus on